much of a bio you should have. Can everybody hear me okay?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think that's on though.
Well, that's for that.
Oh, okay.
This one's for this. So, I mean, I can come over here and do this if you'd like. We did a little thing with Todd Nathan a little while back about, just got some groups of people together from the church to ask about different, well, this one had to do with the worship style. And we had looked at a whole bunch of people in our little group. And it was kind of funny because afterwards, when when we combined the years that my wife and I, because my wife was basically born in Calvary Church, when you put all that together, I mean, our years combined was more than all the others put together. It's almost 80 years, and I was just kind of amazed to say, wow, it's been like that many years that we have had some kind of contact combined with Calvary Church. Let me go into this. Ryan was gracious enough to try to help you start to think a little differently about what we're going to do here this morning. Because we're going to be talking about life stewardship, because it is the core, the basis of which biblical financial stewardship is based on. It's kind of like the way when we were in Israel a couple years ago that we saw remnants of the temple that Herod had built. And if you know anything of that history, Herod did everything big. And there are stones in the foundation of that temple that are 450 to 600 cubic tons. Massive, massive stones that are just like immovable. This is what we're going to be talking about this morning. Something that is that foundational to all of your financial stewardship. And we're going to try to help clarify that, to give you some definition. So the way this is said here, we'll cover a variety of financial management issues relating to the Christian family in a relevant and challenging way. Yes, we are going to cover some financial, but I really need you to think here a little bit differently with me here this morning. In other words, I need you to come over here into my box, or maybe more so my paradigm. We've got the way you might be looking through a set of blinds over here and you might see nothing, and I'm looking through it over here. I need you to come over here with me a little bit this morning and to just kind of push aside all those different paradigms that you have about stewardship being only financial, because that's what mostly we've been taught. It's only financial. And we're going to be talking about life stewardship this morning. I've got two fundamental objectives. And by the way, this is not to kind of tote what I do, but just to give you an idea, you see that it says integrity, life planning, and financial services. Well, that's just to go to show you that the life planning side is first. The financial services piece is inclusive in that. That just happens to be the business that we're involved in, and that just helps you to understand that that's a big part of my background, a very, very big part of my background. I have two fundamental objectives this morning. One is to reintroduce a perspective on stewardship that we have not had much exposure to, which is biblically holistic life stewardship. And the second objective is to help you in your journey down that path to reaching your full potential by inspiring you to become better stewards. I would say that this is an overview. I'd like you to hang on here a little bit. This is not going to be drudgery. I think it can be actually quite exciting. But if you just listen in and hang in here, I think you're going to be able to see how this all comes together in the end. Let me ask a question here to start with. Does anybody here know what a BHAG is? A B-H-A-G.
Big, hairy, audacious.
You bet. All right, that's great. A big, hairy, audacious goal. Jim Collins wrote that in a book called Good to Great. It's been used in a lot of industry and business. Look, we know what big and hairy is, and we know what goals are, and we know the value of goals. There's been lots of studies done on goals. But what is audacious? Let me give you a little idea what audacious is. Extremely bold or daring, recklessly brave, fearless, as in an audacious warrior, one who will not retreat to the Christian subculture, rather he'll run to the battle lines. Extremely original, without restriction or prior ideas, or two prior ideas, and highly inventive. I'm going to submit to you that life stewardship, which is nothing more than a 2,000-year-old paradigm, which we will talk today contextualized for 21st century America, is a BHAG. It is a big, hairy, audacious goal. But when you do this, you're going to find some of the greatest fulfillment that God has ever had in your life, understanding it from a stewardship perspective. Let me start here, too. This has always been a good way to get going. It's a time to refocus. We've had a lot of energy focused in on this current crisis, and I used to utilize this even 24 months ago. I was saying, learning how to shift our attention from the current crisis into a positive opportunity for you, your family, and your community. We might have talked about financial crisis, but this is about understanding life stewardship. It's about reprioritizing the things that are most important to you. This is going to be biblically based. It's going to be holistic and comprehensive. It has to do with life, and it is focused on stewardship. And I want to be careful about that as well, too, because we hear a lot about stewardship, and I'm always going to try to help bring this back time and time again, that we're going to try to help define what life stewardship is to you. We're going to give you some clarity on that, and that's a word you're going to see here happening. How about a simple definition of life stewardship? Being an accountable caretaker and wise investor to all the resources that God has entrusted to me. That's pretty simple. I think that's a good comprehensive definition. You know, the scriptures teach us that everything that we have been given is something that actually has been given. We'll show that in a minute. I would like to then give you a visual, because this is something that's very important from the beginning. If I can help you identify the best way that I have been able to visualize what biblically holistic life stewardship is, it's in this diagram here. And this has not come overnight, I want you to know. This is God's principles, just like the way that He's revealed to other people in time. I believe that there are 6, actually 7, as you can count those, because there's a circle in the middle, fundamental areas of life stewardship. Now, if you want to make it 8 or 9, I don't care. It really doesn't bother me. But I think that there are no less than 6. If you can consider then, first of all, the material. What about all our natural resources, stuff, home, car, those kinds of things? How about the physical? This has to do with body, health, rest, exercise, even emotional well-being. The scriptures tell us that we have been bought with a price, therefore honor God with your bodies. There's the financial. Of course, we can't forget the financial. 2,350 verses. Larry Burkett's, Ron Blue, Howard Dayton, those guys have all identified all those verses, saying it's a very important aspect. Absolutely. And you know, most of the parables teach about benevolence and generosity. How about vocational? Anything that we do, the spheres of influence that we've been placed in. Anywhere from being a student to someone who's retired. Temporal. Has to do with time. We know that there are so many hours in a day, but we don't know how much time each of us has been given. How are we managing our time in relational? Of course, that's a big one. It's relationships. Who's in the center of that? God's in the center of that. That has to be throughout all the areas. That's the spiritual component. So this is the best visual that I can give you about what biblically holistic life stewardship is all about. Let's talk about stewards for a second. Why are we stewards? Because we don't own anything. That's pretty simple. Who owns it all? The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. That includes us. Colossians 1:16 says, "For by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things were created by him and for him." I think that's really pretty critical. They've been created by him and for him. Now, I'm talking to a class that I think really understands and believes these principles. We want proof of that? Well, the scriptures, we always go back to this. We own nothing. Everything has been first given to us. John 3:27, a man can receive only what is given to him from heaven. And 1 Timothy 6:7 says, "For we have brought nothing into this world, and we cannot take anything out of it either." You know, I've been at some amazing archaeological sites, we see these like statues of soldiers and things like this that have been buried with kings and really powerful people, and they're still there. Well, that's proof that we depart the earth with nothing. We see it over and over and over again. We can't take this with us. Now, how do we apply biblically holistic life stewardship? How do we get a handle on this? Does everybody in this room believe this? God has a plan and purpose for each of us?
Amen.
You bet. And you know, I think that even more than even the Christian community believes this. When Rick Warren sold that book, I shouldn't say he sold it, God orchestrated that. But you know, there's 40 million copies of that were sold, Purpose-Driven Life. And you know, most of them were bought by secular people. They're looking for purpose. They're looking for something significant in their life. Yeah, God has a plan and a purpose for us. We believe this? Sure. There's another scriptural authority. Psalm 139, one of my favorites, like an open book, you watched me grow from conception to birth. All the stories of my life were spread out before you, the days of my life, all prepared before I'd even live one day. Old Testament. You want a New Testament passage? In him we were also chosen, having been predestined according to the plan of him who works out everything in conformity with the purpose of his will. God's got a plan and a purpose. But you know, there's another part to this, that he intends for us to reach our full potential through that purpose. Okay, and what is full potential? I don't want to get too far off on full potential because the scriptures teach us things like God's ways and thoughts are beyond ours. God's understanding no one can fathom. We cannot discover the depths or the limits of God. Let me come back for that for a second. See, because we can't really understand what full potential is, but the best way that I can tell you is that maybe it's here, and then here, and then here, and then here. And some might deduce from that logically, well, then if it's here, 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 maybe that's unreachable. Maybe to a point it is. Paul suggested that, didn't he? He was pressing on toward the goal he had not yet attained. With all the things that Paul accomplished after his conversion, he was still frustrated with saying, I haven't attained what God can do through me. But let's not get hung up on that. That's for another time, another conversation. But from the standpoint of understanding full potential, let's just recognize that God's got the plan and the purpose, and that he intends for us to reach our full potential through that. Where does this come from? This comes from Genesis chapter 12, the context of the blessing through Abraham's seed. That translation, or the context and understanding, is that all nations would be blessed through this seed to enable them to reach their full potential. That's what the point was. And we want to know how close we are connected to that. Well, look at Matthew's gospel, follow the genealogy of Jesus Christ, and it goes right down through Abraham. What does Galatians 3:29 say to us? And if you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to the promise. You know, this is a pretty amazing thought when you really kind of put this in perspective, because Beth and I were in Israel a couple of years ago, and we stood before a gate on Mount Zion that was a Canaanite gate that Abraham had walked through 1,800 years before Christ. That's a pretty awesome place to be. But that's not what we worship. We don't worship the man or the gate, but we can think about the fact that all of that potential that existed in Abraham and being engrafted into that seed gives us the same potential. There isn't any dissipation of the potential in us today that Abraham had back thousands of years ago. That's a pretty amazing thought when you put that in perspective. So, if we understand Scripture to be true, then why is there so much difficulty in getting clarity on God's purpose for our lives in order to achieve that full potential? And I'm going to try to help break that out for you. I think it has to do with these things. I think it has to do with A, the stage of our calling. It has to do with understanding life stewardship, and it has to do with living biblically holistic life stewardship. That's the practical application.